Well, I've made it down to Southern Oregon to get Lady Jupes ready for a summer road trip. And she had a little bit of work she still needed done from the last road trip. So I'm down here. I might sound a little different, might sound a little off, because I'm actually like just in a parking lot. I'm not like in a studio. I'm not in some nice place with good signal and quiet sounds. Nope, I'm just in a parking lot while I get some work done. But the show must go on, Alex.
And what could go wrong with that, particularly with the Starlink situation you've got right now?
Yeah, my Starlink's busted too. The motor, the dish works, so I can rabbit ear it. I've done this. I've gone out there and tried to point it at the northern sky and try to figure out where the satellite's at, and it'll work for a bit. But finally, after about like a week and change, maybe almost 2 weeks, they finally got back to me. They're going to send me a replacement.
That's good. Don't forget to buy an Ethernet adapter if you're getting the square one now.
Right. I think I probably will. I'm going to go from the round dishy to the square dishy. I went shopping today while I was killing time while they were working on the rig. I haven't gone to Best Buy since the pandemic started. I just haven't had a chance to go in. So I was curious, what are they doing for their home automation gear now? And they're really big, of course, on the Amazon ecosystem and the Google ecosystem. Huge on Arlo, and a lot of the video lights that you can attach to your house that have like motion detection. They sell a whole bunch of those. But like I said, I haven't been in a long time, and I'm sure a lot of people listening know this, but I didn't really realize or appreciate that they're doing e-ink displays for all the prices and stuff for most things. Have you seen this? You probably have seen this because you've probably gone in more recently than I have.
It's pretty cool, isn't it?
It works, right? Some of them are a little hard to read, but I like it. I think it's a nice touch. It's cool. And then the one device that really impressed me out of all the stuff there that I saw, I didn't pick it up, but the pricing on the Lenovo smart clock stands that have Google Assistant built in, it looks like an alarm clock, but it has Google Assistant, $29.99 for this thing.
Yeah, that is nice.
Open box, $25. And then they have one with a screen that has the Google cards on it and stuff like that for $89.99.
I was at Best Buy just this week buying a new hard drive, but let's not spoil the show.
Ooh, yeah. Yeah, it was good to go in there, do a little shopping, get a sense of where the pricing's at. And honestly, it doesn't seem like the tech pricing's really changed much. Everything's going up in price except for a lot of the tech stuff. Still seems like it was priced it was a year or two ago.
I feel like walking into Best Buy is how like Harry Potter must feel walking out of Diagon Alley or something. Like this is how normal people live. This is like how Muggles live.
I would have loved to have seen the Starlink kit at Best Buy. I mean, I knew it just wasn't going to happen. But imagine if I could have walked in there and bought a new dish tonight with a working motor.
Imagine this. Imagine if Starlink made a dish that was repairable. Oh.
Whoa, like maybe I could open it up and replace the motor? No. And then I could just carry spare parts on board and then like install them when it goes wrong? That's crazy, Alex.
It's so frustrating. It's going to be like a $3 part that's broken.
Yeah, I'm actually a little concerned about how I'm going to transport it in the future, because as far as I know, it was just transporting it, going down the road, maybe a jarring bump, something broke the motor. And so now I'm thinking about when I do get a replacement dish, like, do I need to get like a case for this thing, like a Pelican case? Like, I don't know. I'm curious what the audience might do if they have a Starlink and they're transporting it. Are there Starlink cases for safe transport? Is that a thing?
We'll build you a wooden crate between me and Brent. I think we can make that happen.
There you go. That looked pretty nice. Well, we're live tonight somehow. I don't know how. The cellular signal is mostly holding on. I've dropped 6,000 packets, so it's not perfect, but it's holding.
Good enough, dude.
We've got folks in the Discord. The self-hosted Discord's going like always at selfhosted.show/Discord. Hit a milestone recently.
We did. We just passed 4,500 members, which is crazy.
That is so great. You got to admit, it was a little awkward when we decided to go with Discord since it is not a self-hosted chat platform, but you can't deny the networking aspect of it.
Well, I just look at the palaver that you and Wes have been through on Linux Unplugged with your Matrix server, and I feel completely vindicated in that decision.
Yeah, you might be right. The Matrix server has been a real learning process. I like to think of it as a long-term investment.
Right, something like that. Now, speaking of long-term planning, it's not that far away, but I'm going to be in the UK in August, early August, so I'm kind of floating the idea of a UK meetup because several people messaged me when we were talking about the Raleigh one saying that they were jealous. The very vague plan at this point is the weekend of August the 6th, somewhere in London so that people can fly in from Ireland and Europe more easily. Somewhere in London, we'll have a meetup, maybe a pub, maybe a community centre, something like that. I don't know. We're going to figure it out. But if you're interested, send me a message on the Discord or hit me up on Twitter at IronicBadger.
I want to go so bad. I bet August is a great time to be in London, too.
It could be. It could be a good time, or it could be snowing and raining sideways in August. Who knows? I mean...
No.
Maybe not snow, but I mean, honestly, it could be 35 Celsius or it could be 10. Who knows?
Do you want people to send you suggestions via email? Maybe the contact page?
The contact page, anything like that, if you've got a venue in mind. I was thinking, we did a few events for Red Hat Consulting when I was in London at Brewdog. Those pubs are quite hip and trendy and modern. They've got like a whole area upstairs that you can kind of rent out, some of them. So maybe something like that would be nice because they're sort of half open, half inside type thing. So kind of hedge our bets on the weather.
That's probably a pretty good idea. Let's be honest. Man, I'm so jealous. Please take pictures. I want to see it.
Maybe one of these days we'll get you out there, huh? Maybe FOSDEM.
I'd love to. Definitely on my list. It kind of got set back the last couple of years, but it's definitely on my list. This is one of those episodes. We have them, I think, about every other episode. I'm going to have a bunch of work after this episode. I just know it. I know it. And it's going to be because my wife's going to demand it. You have come across something. I feel like either you talked to me about it before off air or someone did. It just doesn't seem right that we haven't talked about this on air yet.
Well, a couple of weeks ago, the Tandoor project, a self-hosted recipe manager, released version 1.4. So they've been in development for a year plus at this point, so it's very possible you've seen it on Reddit at some point before.
Yeah, maybe.
But the 1.4 release has got some notable changes in it. There's a whole new shopping list feature built in, which is pretty darn cool.
And so just to be clear, this is a recipe manager that you would run on your own system, or they offer a self-hosted version. And if we haven't talked about it on the show before, we should have.
Well, we've talked about Chowdown, and I'm fairly sure we've talked about Mealy before. If we haven't, I use both of those equally. I still love Chowdown because it's a simple markdown-based system. There's no database, there's no craziness. It's just a stupid, simple markdown plain text files. But having a database gives you some nice features, like in Tandoor, for example. When you import a recipe, you can then add it into a meal plan. So you could have a family-facing meal plan dashboard. Take it one step further, the app knows which ingredients go into those recipes. So you can say, excuse me, Tandoor, could you please add that to my shopping list? And then pull that shopping list up when you're at the grocery store and just buy everything you need for that specific thing. Now, what I saw in Reddit as a particularly interesting idea was some kind of like self-hosted HelloFresh. Someone suggested to the developer that he integrates with Instacart's API with those recipes to order 3 green peppers and some chicken and whatever else you need for that recipe. So you end up with this like self-hosted HelloFresh type thing, which I thought would be an amazing, amazing thing.
No kidding. Brilliant idea. This has another feature that you're probably about to touch on, but I just have to talk about because this is what won me over. And it is one of the newer features they just recently implemented, and it's this really slick import feature where you can give it the URL of a website that has a recipe. I threw one of those like essentially a blog post where they tell you their whole life story just to give you a recipe, and they have pictures. And
oh, I hate those so much.
I found like the worst one, man, where it has like slide over JavaScript and just all kinds of junk.
Oh.
And I gave the URL to Tandoor, and it actually processed the page. It pulled out all the individual steps, all of the individual ingredients, and it itemized it all just perfectly. I threw some simpler ones at it. It did great too, but I was really impressed that it got that really complicated one. And so it's like you just take this really, really long 3-page post and condense it down into just a good block of information you need, and then you add it to your database. And now you got that recipe.
It's amazing. It will import the images from the website. It will also pick out keywords.
Yes.
It will figure out the steps you need, the ingredients, everything. So the import stuff is really slick. And you can do one recipe at a time, or you can just give it a list of URLs with a new line per link. and it just works. I mean, that's the best kind of works, right?
I had the wife use it because she was just yesterday talking to me about how, my grandma used index cards, and when I first started cooking, I created a binder, she said, and I had all my recipes in this binder that I'd printed out, but that's gone now, and she wanted to start collecting her recipes again. And so I had her sit down and input a few of them into this. And I'd say within 15 minutes, she probably had 4 recipes added, and she was testing the shopping cart feature to see how that works. And then she was visualizing, okay, well, how would this work if I'm at the grocery store and I have my phone with me? How would the UI look? And so she resizes the browser to see if it works okay on mobile. It totally did. It looks like it's going to render just fine. And so she had herself a list that she could just go down the aisle and check off as she buys, and she experimented with seeing what happens if multiple recipes call for the same ingredient, and if it gets the right amounts correct in the shopping cart, and it does. It just does a really good job with all of that. And it supports Markdown for your cooking notes.
That is cool, yes. I was going to touch on the comment feature at the bottom. There's also another option to log a specific cook. So I'm thinking for my barbecue grilling, if I put the brisket recipe that I use in there, I can link things like the YouTube video, but then I can also give myself a rating out of 5 and a specific date and time that's in there, and then tie that into a specific comment on a specific day to say I tried a new technique that day with grilling. It's a serious business, don't you know? You
got to make sure you get it right. And if you nailed it, you got to note down what you did. Or if you mess it up.
Exactly. Now, the other thing that I really, really like is it has a servings option at the top of the page with a plus and a minus. And in the ingredients thing here, let's say you've got 2 pounds of chicken in your recipe and it's 4 servings. I can just hit the plus button and double that to, I don't know, 7. Let's go with 7 servings. Now, I mean, the mental maths isn't too difficult on that one. But how many times have you had to do some weird fractional maths on a cup of flour or something weird like that? And the servings thing in here, it works flawlessly.
Yeah. And that's also nice when you're using it to generate the shopping list. So you know how much you need of something in there. The other thing that I didn't get a lot of time to use, but I think was really interesting to my wife, was it has a meal planner in there, and you get a calendar and you can plan out your meals. Of course, you can select the recipes that you've already input to the system. Then, if you would like, it will actually export you out a calendar file, an ICS file or whatever they are, and you can import that meal plan into your calendar app of choice so you have it somewhere outside Tandoor as well, which I thought that was a really nice touch.
Now, for Hadia's thing, there is a whole cookbooks feature. So you could kind of group recipes, like grandma, mum, wife, whatever. For me, I could have a barbecue cookbook, for example. That would be pretty cool. There's so many features in this thing. I feel like we could spend an hour on it almost. But if you're interested, it's obviously free and open source software over on GitHub. There'll be a link in the show notes. It's at Tandoor Recipes in GitHub.
Yeah, definitely worth checking out. I mean, when's the last time we get this excited about a recipe app? I mean, maybe we just like recipe apps, but this is a whole management suite. But what was the process like of getting it installed? Because I tried their online demo. Since I'm on the road, I didn't want to go through all the process of loading it up. But I think I'm going to have to do that when I get home. So give me an idea of what I'm looking at.
It's not too bad. 3 containers. There's a database, so Postgres. There's the app itself, which is a Django-based application. And then there's an Nginx front end. I mean, you can switch out the Nginx front end web server if you like with your web server of choice. Personally, I would prefer it if the developer shipped the Tandoor application with a simple web server built in. The G-Unicorn stuff that's built into the app that ships is not really fit for purpose in terms of public hosting, and he mentions that in the documentation. He's very clear about that. And that's why he suggests people spin up Nginx. But I'm a fairly experienced Docker administrator at this point, a container guy. And I got a couple of my file paths wrong, so some of it's on me, admittedly. But it took me about an hour to get this going, simply because I had to link 3 containers together and make sure everything was just so, and there's an environment variables file and all that kind of stuff. It's not too difficult, honestly, if you don't copy-paste the wrong paths. But it could be easier if it was just an all self-contained app, like, for example, Plex is.
I understand there's a bit of a debate there. Some people have the philosophy you just do the core application and then you do one instance of Nginx and one instance of your database. And maybe whatever else you might have, and don't run multiple copies of that software in a container. And I definitely think that's probably an appropriate setup for production. Anything that's in a business or enterprise or anything that's going to scale beyond a dozen users, probably worth considering. But for this sort of scenario, the one that you're talking about now, where you're going to run it on your home server, it's going to be you and your wife and maybe me and maybe Brent. They're going to use it total, right? And so there it does make a lot of sense to just have something that is maybe just a single Docker container. You pop it on your machine and you go.
Particularly as it's not a super heavy application, right? It's a small Django app and an Nginx web server. Like that's very tiny.
Also, I mean, I know this is easy for me to say, but wouldn't be impossible to have two types of containers. One that's just the application core and one that includes maybe the full suite of everything you need.
Yeah, so Mr. Developer Man, Vabine1111, if you're listening, that's pretty much the only feedback I have for you, really. The application's great. The stuff you've done over the last year plus improving this application is to be commended, truly. But the setup process, I know I saw in Reddit that you don't understand why people find it difficult. I hope just what we've articulated there helps a little bit of meat on that particular bone. It's just linking different things together in people's different setups. Some people are running Unraid, some people are running TrueNAS. I'm running Docker Compose through an Ansible templating thing that I created. So, there's lots of different strokes for different folks, and anything you can do to reduce that deployment complexity is going to increase your adoption. It's as simple as that.
Definitely. Well said. And I'm looking forward to getting this running. This is going to be something I know the wife and I are really going to enjoy. But I don't think I'll be setting it up on my Proxmox system. Not yet. But I am planning to build one soon, and it sounds like we got a brand new release that looks great.
We do, 7.2. Now, the headline feature for me, besides, fun stuff like the Linux kernel getting a bump and QEMU and LXC and ZFS and all those things getting bumps to the latest versions, is support for the accelerated VirtIO GL display driver. I know, it sounds thrilling, right? But hear me out. This particular display driver is in software. And I went from about 13 frames per second. We all know what that feels like. That's what the traditional VM in a browser has felt like for a decade. I went from about 10 or 15 frames a second to over 100.
Hey, whoa, really?
Just changing that feature. And there was no drivers required on the guest. I had to install a couple of packages on Proxmox itself, but it tells you what they are in the documentation. And that was it. I was done. And suddenly I've got 10 times performance improvement. How often does that happen?
That's huge. I can tell you, I've experienced that on Parallels on the M1 Max. When they added support for the M1 platform, they added VirtIO and VirtIO GL for the graphics pass-through, and it makes the desktop on Linux responsive like it's on the metal. It's really, really great. And so how are you accessing it through Proxmox? Is it through the web console?
Through the web browser. Yeah, nothing crazy at all. So there's a Spice client that connects to the VM's console in the browser. There's no hardware pass-through going on here. I want to be absolutely clear. This is all in software. Traditionally, we did a whole episode of Linux Unplugged a long time ago now on GPU pass-through and how much of a bitch it can be to get the right hardware and get the right software and everything all lined up just tickety-boo. It's a lot easier these days. Now NVIDIA have kind of capitulated there, but I digress. This is all software. And, I can't overstate just a 10x performance improvement right in front of my eyes. And so now I've gone from needing a spare laptop to test Linux desktop distros to get the feel, right? To get that high frame rate feel of what a new GNOME release feels like, or what a new KDE Plasma release feels like. I can do this now in the browser from Proxmox, and it's so great.
That's awesome. I've decided Proxmox is going on the studio servers. We put a poll out to the audience again and said, what do you think of a Proxmox with Nix combo? Probably some OpenSUSE in there too, just to make the lizards happy. And we're going to have 3 systems, and at least 2 of them are going to be running Proxmox. Going to start with 7.2 out of the gate. So we're going to get this feature out of the gate.
Proxmox is a great choice. There's it's a Debian user space with a modified Ubuntu kernel, which means that you get ZFS support as well. No DKMS nonsense to mess around with. It's just there. And you get a nice little GUI on top to manage your VMs. I mean, there's some other stuff too. Like they got a pretty slick backup server. And, the community around Proxmox is really starting to gather steam. I've really noticed in the last, I would say, 2 to 3 years, it's gone from being a kind of niche project. It's really up and coming right now.
They've been consistent. They've delivered over and over and over again with it. And I think that makes a difference. I've just seen their reputation get stronger and stronger. If they're ever looking to sponsor, hit us up.
We basically just gave them a pretty good plug right there for free, huh?
I know. They're good for a while, aren't they?
One other thing I want to point out that I thought was pretty cool, and this is a very minor annoyance, but if you're a Proxmox user, you will appreciate it. You can now set your default VM ID range. So when you go and click the button that says Create VM, it normally assigns a 3-digit number like 100, 102, whatever. And it will just do it sequentially based on the next number that's available, a bit like a DHCP reservation. Now I can select start that range and end that range of the auto kind of like VM ID DHCP requests, for want of a better idea. I can select a range to put those numbers in, and I can have my kind of normal VMs sit at the top where I see them all the time, and then my more ephemeral stuff sits at the bottom out of the way where I use it for testing.
Linode.com/SSH. Go there to get $100 in 60-day credit on a new account, and you go there to support this here show. That's right. It's made possible by you taking advantage of our sponsor. And of course, Linode is one that we enthusiastically endorse. They started in 2003, and they have been building the best service to run applications on Linux since. And you could also use as part of a multi-cloud strategy. Like I do this. I have some servers on my LAN, and I have the bulk of all of our audience-facing systems on Linode. And we also have some of our work systems on there too. So I kind of pick and choose based on the workload. And what I love about it is they've got pricing that makes that really accessible. So some systems, they start at just $5 a month. Other systems, they have a lot more options like AMD EPYC processors. We have one box that has 96 gigs of RAM, right? I mean, like, you can really max this stuff out. 48 CPU cores in that box, NVMe hard drives. They're great. And then, of course, they have 11 data centers for you to choose from. So you're going to find something close to you or your customers, depending on how you're doing it. They've also got a great dashboard. They got the best support in the business. We hear that all the time. The other thing that we hear from the audience all the time is that they'll deploy themselves to server for just like their family, for like a gaming server or Nextcloud or Photos or whatever it might be. Recently, and I never really thought about doing this, but recently I heard from an audience member, he runs Pi-hole up on Linode, and then he points all of his systems to that, even his laptop and stuff and his family members' laptop. So when they're traveling, they're always using his DNS system and they're getting the filtering up on Linode. That's great. And when you get $100, you can play around with stuff like that, see what sticks, see if the value's really there. And it's a great way to support the show and learn something. So go to linode.com/SSH. You go there, you get that $100, you go deploy something, you go learn something, you support the show. It's a win-win. linode.com/SSH.
Now, after my buddy Brent went home the other day, I was sat in my basement by myself, Billy no mates, within earshot of my server, just doing some tinkering around because we did some electrics down there and I wanted to automate something that we put in with one of the Shellys in a light switch. And I was sat next to my server and I could just hear...
Oh, no.
And I was like, oh, no.
Dead disk.
Turns out it wasn't the cable, people.
Oh, right. Last time you thought it was the cable. Oh, no, it really was going.
It really was the drive. So quick trip to Best Buy the next morning. Bought a new 14 terabyte easy store, ripped that bad boy out of the case, and it's now in my backup server doing my whole like pre-clear ritual testing burn-in thing.
No data loss.
No, luckily I was able to just copy all the data from the failing drive onto the rest of my MergerFS array. I had more than 10 terabytes free, so I was lucky. There, really, I could do that. I just removed it from the array and copied everything across with rsync.
What do you think it would take for a new file system to work its way into your life? For you to find a new love for a file system? Just say hypothetically, like bcachefs comes out. It's so great. It's XFS meets ButterFS meets ZFS. And it's just next level performance too. What would it take for you to switch? Would it be a matter of years? Would it be something you'd start experimenting with sooner than later?
I don't know as I have a need for anything new. My needs through MergerFS have been met so comprehensively. Back in the day, if you look at the Perfect Media Server kind of blog post series, you can kind of see my transition over the years from I think it was AUFS to MHDDFS to MD RAID through ZFS even for actual media files. And then I ended up with just ext4 and XFS on the drives themselves, kind of bridged with MergerFS on top. It's just been so reliable for 6 or 7 years. I don't even know when I wrote that first post. It was a long time ago. I don't know, like I felt the need to add ZFS into the setup for data I truly care about, mostly for replication ease and stuff like that. But I've kind of solved that now with Restic as well. So I've got a couple of ways I back stuff up for the important data, but for media files that are write once, read a couple of times probably, MergerFS does everything I need. What are you hinting at there, Chris?
Well, so the word on the street, although we'll see if this really pans out, but the word on the street is that we're going to see bcachefs hit the Linux kernel in about the next 6 months or so, maybe a little bit longer, but it's nigh. And the developer, Kent Overstreet, recently said that his goal is to essentially make a file system that does just that. It kind of replaces, or it offers the advantages of XFS, which XFS is a very solid, very tried and true file system, and with some of the benefits of Btrfs, like copy on write, snapshots, stuff like that.
That's pretty cool.
He was asked recently, who's using bcachefs? Is anybody using it in production? And he said, well, I do know that a lot of video shops that are dealing with multiple 4K streams are using bcachefs. And it made me think, like, I think every time I've switched a major file system, it's been to solve a performance problem or a scalability problem. Like, I really finally gave in and tried Btrfs for real when I needed to solve storage issues on a Raspberry Pi, and I just wasn't going to use ZFS. I had no choice. So I had to learn Btrfs, and then I learned that I actually liked it quite a bit. But I only did it when I was trying to solve, like, a new problem. And I just wonder, like, bcachefs is going to come along one day. It's going to be great, no doubt about it, but I'm kind of the school of thought that when it comes to my data, I like to give that stuff years, years of cooking, years of other people using it in production. That's just one area where I'll kind of tap the brakes a little bit. And so that's why it took me a while to come around to Btrfs, to be honest.
That's really what I love about ZFS. I know it has a bit of a learning curve and a bit of an aura around it, but what are you laughing at?
An aura. I think a bit of an aura is a funny way to put it. Yeah.
But it does. I mean, just listen to you and Alan back in the day on TechSnap. Like, you made it sound like this massive, complex beast, and actually it's not. It's just 2 drives in a mirror, all right? I mean, that's it. That's what I use anyway.
Yeah. It does. It can be very complex, but yeah. Not so bad, really. So I'm glad that you got it found. I'm sorry there was actually the drive and not the cable, though. That does stink.
Well, so this presents an interesting opportunity for content, actually. So this will be the first shuck drive that I've had fail on me. I don't have the plastic casing anymore. I chucked that out as a matter of principle. So I'm really interested to see what happens when I send this 12 terabyte drive, which is only about 15 months old, back to Western Digital. It came with a 2-year warranty, and there's apparently something called the Magnuson-Moss Act, I think that's what it is. If they try and play funny buggers with it, I can quote them and say that, and apparently then they'll just capitulate and send me their replacement reconditioned drive because they can't prove that my shucking it broke it or something.
Let's talk a little Ansible, one of our favorite topics here, and I think maybe one we should probably share a little more on the show as Brent begins his journey down the Ansible lane. But in the meantime, before we go down Ansible lane, maybe we should stop off on Bitwarden Drive. What do you got here?
What about if I put some peanut butter with the chocolate?
Yeah, that sounds perfect for me.
And bring Ansible together with Bitwarden. How about that?
Right. That sounds good, actually.
There was a chat happening on Discord, I think it was this morning, where Orange, Jake, who was on the show a little while ago, was talking about how he uses Ansible Vault crossed with Bitwarden. There is a reference to one of my favorite bash.org moments where his demo password is Hunter2. Those that know about that one. But essentially, what this allows me to do is use Bitwarden as my credential store for my Ansible Vault encryption password. So all of my secrets remain encrypted using Ansible Vault with 256-bit blah, 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 as a file that I store version controlled in Git. What I'm doing now is rather than having a clear text file sitting on disk to decrypt that file, I am now using the Bitwarden CLI to connect the vault password that I've now put in Bitwarden to unlock that encrypted file in Ansible.
This feels like it could be pretty powerful. I think I'm understanding, but so essentially as Ansible is setting up a machine, if it needs to deploy software that needs some sort of secret password or key, instead of having to put that somewhere in the Ansible config or whatever, there's now an option to have, as Ansible is deploying, use the Bitwarden CLI to look that password up and sort of insert that password as it's being deployed. Is that right?
You could do that using the lookup plugin, I think. But the way that we're doing it right now, at least, is using so you can actually, this is a really neat trick that I didn't know until this morning. You can put in your Ansible config the vault file location as a script. And in that script, you can actually have it do the Bitwarden CLI export lookup thing of the password. And then it returns it as a string, which then feeds into the rest of the process. So all I'm doing, I haven't moved any of the secrets themselves out of Ansible, out of the vault in Ansible, but I've moved the vault password from a local text file on my laptop into Bitwarden. And now I've connected the two together using Orange's post.
Very nice. We'll have links to this so you can follow along. We'll have links to this in the show notes, of course, at selfhosted.show/71.
I thought it'd be really difficult, but it turned out to be about a 5 or 10 line change. There'll be a commit in the show notes if you're curious as just to how easy it is.
Easier than getting the recipe app going.
Much easier, yes.
We love you, Tandoor. We love you.
We've been having a lot of fun on the Discord over the last couple of weeks with Ansible and infrastructure as code talk, as you can probably tell from how much of it's in the show. One of the things I decided to do when Brent was here, he just flippantly asked me, can you do DNS from your Docker Compose generator? And I was like, sure, knowing full well I couldn't, but how hard could it be, right? Turned out to be quite the operation. It took me about 2 or 3 days with the help of about 4 or 5 people on Discord to write possibly one of the most, dare I say it, over-engineered Ansible tasks ever. This thing essentially takes a traffic label, strips out with regex a bunch of stuff surrounding the bit of data I want, which is, the host name of like test.jupiterbroadcasting.com. That's the bit I actually want, but I had to find a way to iterate over all the labels in the nested list that I have in Ansible and then extract them and do what I needed to do, and then only act on them when the item in the list was set to active equals true. There's a lot of logic in there. Anyway, the upshot is we can now specify for all of the self-hosted JB infrastructure simply by adding a container with a traffic label into our Compose definition file. We add the DNS record automatically into Cloudflare.
That is pretty damn slick. So just by having the label for traffic,
yep,
it figures out from there what the host name should be and all of that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's it. And what's particularly fun is, let's say I wanted to spin up an Nginx just to test, for example. I just copy and paste that in there. And if I put test. As long as the domain's in my Cloudflare account, or I have permissions, like you've given me delegated permissions on jb.com, I can add something into that Git repo. And we could then theoretically have a continuous integration GitHub action that would pick up that change and deploy that new container and also the DNS records in Cloudflare automatically for us.
That's what I'm talking about, Alex. That is awesome.
It's really cool.
That is awesome. And that is such a great example of, we recently were talking about Nix and Nix packages and managing Nix OS and all of that being a deterministic system and how it compared to Ansible. And this is such a great example where you can go much further with Ansible. You can go much beyond just what you can do with Nix. Very exciting. And it makes me pumped to kind of redo some of this infrastructure stuff and do it like this from the beginning, because like down the road, it's just going to make future deployments so much simpler, right? That's really it.
When you spin up a new show or decide you're going to have a garage sale or whatever it is, it's all automatic.
That's so great. Yeah. And done once, and now it's done.
One of my favorite tricks in this particular task, and there are a couple, one is to use JSON query to create a dictionary that I can split and join and what have you. within the task itself. The other one is to use what's called a ternary operator. Now, Ginger, which is the templating language that Ansible has, is pretty amazing, and you can do a lot of cool stuff. But I was running into an issue where my item.active contents was either true or false, and the Ansible module was expecting the phrase present or absent. Now, you as a human can work out that true equals present and that absent equals false. Computer is stupid. You have to tell computer this thing. Turns out with the ternary operator, we can actually do that. So if we pass in a true or false statement into the ternary operator and then specify just a couple of other values, present and absent in this case, we can have true or false actually be any other string that we require. Very simple, very cool.
Tailscale.com/self-hosted. Go there to get a free personal account for up to 20 devices, and you support the show. Tailscale is a zero config VPN. You get it on any device in minutes. It'll manage your firewall rules. It'll help with double carrier grade, crazy NAT, all of that. I'm using Tailscale right now. In fact, Alex and I were using Tailscale earlier today as well in a way that I haven't really used it before. Tell me about the fanciness that we were doing. Share it with the people, actually.
Well, I span up Tandoor on my LAN, and I thought, it'd be pretty cool if I could just share this demo instance with Chris, because you're having some issues with their public demo. Mm-hmm. So I went into my Tailscale dashboard, and I clicked Sharing Settings, got a link to share one of my specific hosts, my Docker host, with you. You accept a couple of things in your Tailscale dashboard on your end. Straight away, you've got access just to that specific host, but you could also use it as an exit node as well. So let's say you have a friend geographically in a useful place for you. You could ask that friend to share just that VM or whatever it is, and you won't have access to the rest of that person's LAN, only to that specific host and only as an exit node if they permit it.
Yep, it is a superpower, and it's something that just makes collaborating with people so great. And the way Tailscale works is it uses WireGuard's noise protocol to create a flat mesh network between all of your machines. And if you've got two machines on the same LAN and you're talking to their Tailscale IPs, it figures that out. And it actually will just go over your LAN. It doesn't need to go through some central proxy or anything like that. They have a authorization backplane that they use to proxy the connection to set everybody up to get them established, but then you're talking directly to each other after that. They also work with your single sign-on provider, which means they also support two-factor if you've got that going. You got to go try Tailscale, because once you have it set up in a couple of minutes, you've got an always-on VPN protected by WireGuard. It's so slick, and I've got it running now on my family's machines as well as my Raspberry Pis, my servers, my VMs. It brings it all together, and you can try it for yourself for free for up to 20 machines at tailscale.com/self-hosted. That's where you got to go to support the show and try it out for 20 machines for totally free at tailscale.com/self-hosted.
Scott writes in looking for chip shortage alternatives. With this continuing on through the foreseeable future and Raspberry Pis becoming the new unobtainium, I would like to hear some ideas from you both as to what to look for in alternatives. I'd also love to hear from other insiders what they're using through feedback of their own. Specifically, this is a problem for me since I like having dedicated systems for certain tasks. For example, a Pi-hole is a dedicated appliance for me, and I want my DNS to be reliable. I just want stuff to work with minimal administration. I've got loads of other hobbies, and I don't want to spend all my free time being my own IT admin, as they're always overworked, underpaid, and usually grumpy after business hours. Can relate, Scott. Can relate.
You may be right about that. Got to admit. You know, Scott, the first thing that came to mind for me, and this is something that I've already done once, is low power, cheap used laptops on eBay. Often they have more horsepower than a Raspberry Pi. Some of them even have features like QuickSync, so they make it great for Plex. The only real challenges that I've run into, and why I haven't really talked about it a lot on air, is because I'm almost always hitting some kind of I/O limitation that just drives me crazy. Maybe it's USB or Ethernet or something like that. But depending on what your needs are, like if you could find a laptop like some of these ThinkPads that support 2 disks and maybe you're okay with just that amount of storage, you could actually make a laptop work pretty well in place of a Raspberry Pi. What do you think, Alex? You got any ideas?
Well, something like an old ThinkPad you can have pretty cheap. Like I've just had a quick look now. T450, which is 5th gen Intel, 140, depending on the spec and how much RAM and disk and what have you that's in there. But we've also been talking about this on the Discord a fair bit recently with the like tiny mini micro stuff, that kind of stuff, like Serve the Home. I've been doing a whole series on this stuff. Now, they typically buy the higher end stuff, the newer stuff, or they get sent it anyway. We've been talking about the kind of the lower end of that market. There are some old thin client boxes that have been knocking around for a long time. I think is it Wise, spelt WYSE? These guys, they do thin clients for enterprise. So they've got boxes knocking around by the 1,000, and you can get them super cheap on eBay. And often they've got Ethernet built in and USB. Depending on the model you go for, you might be lucky to get one with some SATA space in there. You know, maybe you could have a SATA SSD in there, or an M.2 if you get really lucky. So that's the route I'd probably go.
Yeah, we looked at a couple of those recently, and those could be really awesome too for low power. I think like the biggest bottleneck there was memory on those units. Like they're usually pretty, but depending on, again, what you're doing, that might not be an issue. It just kind of depends on your workload.
These Wise boxes are about the size of 2 or 3 CD cases, maybe. So they're very, very small, and they're very, very cheap. They can be had for as low as $15, $20, something like that. Some of them don't include memory at that kind of price, but some of them do.
And they're x86. They're Atoms, right? I mean, you could just run anything.
Some are Atom, some are AMD.
All right. Well, Oliver writes in. He says, "Hi, guys. Thanks for the show. I've been listening from the beginning, and I've learned a lot. I've been struggling to find a great self-hosted podcast solution for a while now. Audiobook Shelf has recently blown up, and it's been really actively developed. And the podcast feature is probably the most excited I've been for a self-hosted application for a long time. But there's still some work to be done. It's amazing what's been accomplished already, though. It's now my primary podcast listening app. I wonder, Alex, have you played it all with podcasts in Audiobook Shelf?
I've still got it spun up from the episode we talked about it a couple of weeks ago.
Did you try a podcast in there?
I haven't done any podcasts, but we could do a live test right now if you like.
Oh, all right. That's exciting. I know this is a common question that comes into the show is, hey, how can I self-host my own podcast? And I never really feel like we have a super great answer, because I think a great aspect of podcasts, in my opinion, is that, now I know not everybody does it this way, but for me, is that the MP3 file is actually locally on the storage device of my phone. And so I can listen to a podcast without using data, or when I don't have signal, or when I just don't want to use much battery life either. And so I really like having podcasts locally on my phone. So that's why I've ended up trying to use podcast apps that sync, but I don't love any of it.
I found it, so I have to create a new library. So I've just added a new folder to my audio bookshelf container. So I'm going to have a dedicated podcasts folder. Okay, that container's now spun up. So I'm going to just load up audio bookshelf, add a new library, select podcasts from the list. I've got to give it the correct icon. That's very important. Now, interestingly enough, the metadata provider is iTunes. So even though it's a self-hosted podcast server, for want of a better word, still using internet-based metadata.
That's a real shame. You know, they could be using the podcast index, and they could also use Podping, and they wouldn't even need to use the index. That's a bit of a shame.
Oh, I see. So I can have I can put an RSS feed in there. All right. So where's the self-hosted RSS feed? selfhosted.show/RSS.
/RSS. Yep. It's real simple.
All right. Let's put that in there. Let's see what happens when I click submit. Oh, that's pretty cool. It's found the album art. It's got the genres correct. It's got the description. Auto download episodes. Check. Add podcast. All right. Let's see what happens.
All right. That doesn't seem too bad. I got to be honest.
Okay. This is pretty great.
Yeah.
This is the way, you know, you were just saying you don't have a great way. This is it, I think, anyway.
Okay. All right. Maybe we got to give this a more serious go then, because this would be nice to just have a solution for people, because they write in all the time. Okay. Thanks, Oliver. I'm going to try that out. I think that'll be pretty great. We got some boosts into the show. First one came from XThumbSX, who sent us a boost using a new podcast app, 5,000 sats. He mentions that there are silicone wedding bands that solve the issue of like I think we were talking about getting them in the cases or getting them, problems with when working with electricity. He says this is also great when installing smart devices. They don't dig into your finger when gripping tools or sports equipment. That's pretty awesome. I didn't realize they made silicone wedding rings. I'm such an idiot. I never even checked,
It's not something that occurred to me. I just took mine off and didn't think about it.
Yeah. Cospeland sent us a boost for 3,690 sats. He always sends us in like numbers that I think mean something. And he says, yes, the numbers are Tesla numbers. And he also wants to know if we have any SUS servers. Do you have any SUS servers?
I do not.
All right. I didn't think so. Not surprising, really. I have one in production, and I have one on a Raspberry Pi CM4. So, not a lot, but I have some.
For 500 sats, Jin Formatique writes in, "Hi Chris, I just stumbled upon a French blog discussing about podcasting 2.0. The article is translated to English, and here's what they did. As podcast lovers for over 2 decades, we have founded Aures, A-U-R-E-S.
Aures, yeah.
My French pronunciation is poo-poo, shall we say. Anyway, they're aiming to build a fair and sustainable ecosystem for everyone in the podcasting industry. They've developed Castopod, a free and open source solution for hosting your podcasts in order to facilitate access to podcasting 2.0 for everybody."
Yeah, Castopod's actually pretty neat. There's another one out there too that's being created, and they're supporting all of the podcasting 2.0 spec out of the gate, which means things like the alternative enclosure tag, transcripts, clips, and things like that. And the idea is that you could just kind of use their out-of-the-box solution. I mean, if you're looking to start a podcast right now and you want something that's kind of like an all-in-one back-end package, like a hosted fireside, that's what Castopod is. And I've looked at it because it is enticing. It'll support clips. It'll generate video clips, and it supports the podcasting 2.0 namespace stuff for that. It does the value for value stuff, so you can do boosts, and it supports the transcript stuff. There's a lot in that spec, and they're one of the premier places that are supporting it. So that's pretty cool. I haven't tried it myself because we already have a whole system built out. But if I were starting today and I didn't have anything, I'd be pretty tempted to try Castopod, I have to say. Toxic Safety 89 wrote in 2 days ago with 3,333 sats. I feel like that's a lucky number. All threes? That's got to be a lucky number thing. "I swear to God, my Alexa and Siri are getting worse and worse at understanding me. I love the HomePods like you, Chris, but it's a 50-50 hit rate these days. Do you guys have these problems? Is there anything better out there?"
Well, I can't tell you the number of times I have to put on a very bad American accent in order to make my Google Home understand me.
Oh, really? It is. Have you tried changing the voice to the British voice?
I have. In fact, when Brent was here, we had a good giggle because we were doing some YouTube searches, and I searched for something like Tool Danny Carey drumming videos or something, and it came up with something completely random. And I was like, Tool drumming Danny Carey videos, and it just worked first time. So
that's your American? That's so great.
Yeah, it is. Say what you will, but that's my American accent. What of it, bro?
I have to be honest. I feel like the Echo, the Amazon devices, their hit rate for me remains the same, but their annoyance rate has skyrocketed. So I don't have any Echoes in the RV where I'm at now, and I don't have any anywhere else except for in one spot, and that is in the studio proper, like the main studio, the JB1 studio where I'm live streaming anyways. I don't care if there's an Echo in there. And that thing is inserting ads and by the ways and did you knows and would you like all the time now. It's so frustrating that I've stopped using it.
By the way, did you know you can ask for groceries in 9 different languages?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Cool. It's not what I asked for.
And then on the flip side with the HomePods, which I too, I like them like you, Toxic. But the thing is, I swear to God, they're getting stupider. I agree with you. Like, I don't know what it is, but the hit rate is so bad these days that I stop, I enunciate really clearly, I speak directly at it. And it used to be when I swear, when I got the HomePods and set them up, I could just bark into the air no matter what noise was going on, and they would hear me. And it was such a neat parlor trick. I would show it to people. Like, we could have it super loud in here, and I would say something quietly to the HomePod, and it would still hear me. And everybody was so impressed. And now I would never dare doing that. I swear it's gotten worse. So I'm in the same boat as you, Toxic. If anybody out there is using another system besides one of these commercial systems that are doing a cloud dictation and all of that, please let me know how it's working for you and if the hit rates are any better.
Real-time feedback in the Discord. One of our Australian buddies tells me that Almond and Ada, powered by Home Assistant, are some good alternatives. So maybe we should give those a go.
But how accurate? Like that, I hear that.
I don't know.
But how are the hit rates compared to the commercial ones? That's what is it a downgrade? Because when you're the dad and you've deployed all this stuff and then your family goes to use it and it fails them, I take it personally every time. I'm embarrassed for the HomePods when they fail to recognize what the wife is asking for. It's embarrassing. Send us a boost and let us know. If you'd like to send us a boost, get a new podcast app at newpodcastapps.com. Good news. Sats are on sale, especially today. They're on sale as we record. And the great thing is you can buy them cheaper and they're still the same great Sats.
What is Bitcoin these days? What's it doing?
I mean, not that I'm watching, but $28,914. Not that I'm watching.
Oof.
I know. But like I say, you get more Sats now for your money. I don't care. It's still, you can still send us the same 3,000 Sats. It's just, you got them for cheaper. And you can load them up in a new podcast app.
In a few years' time, we'll be laughing, huh?
Yeah, really. Newpodcastapps.com. Go grab one. Also, if you want a web player that syncs to a mobile device, I think I was Podverse. I was just trying this out. This is an interesting one. So their whole thing with Podverse is a full-featured web client that syncs to a mobile device client. So and it also supports it doesn't do boosts, but it supports all the other podcasting 2.0 features, which is pretty great.
Been playing around with Audiobook Shelf whilst you've been talking a little bit there, and it's the way to go. You can specify a specific date, like in the self-hosted back catalogue. I wanted to download everything from May last year, and just in the time we've been talking there, which is 5 or 10 minutes, it's gone and downloaded all those episodes in that time. It doesn't do them all. It only does the ones I asked for, which is, chef's kiss.
That's nice. All right. Boy, another one of these episodes where I've got way too much stuff to do afterwards.
Now, don't forget, we're still working with cloudfree.shop over there. The coupon code self-hosted still gets you $1 off per plug, and also mylocalbytes.com if you're in Europe or the UK. Same deal over there, £1 off one of those plugs too. Coupon code self-hosted.
Yay! Go help our friends out. They're selling you stuff that's ready to work.
It's been a while since we mentioned them, but they're still going strong, and particularly My Local Bytes, all of the affiliate revenues we get off that, it's very, very small amount. A few cents, honestly, per plug. We're going to donate all of that to some open source projects upstream coming up soon. We'll do an announcement about that soon. But if you want to support open source as well as the show, head on over to mylocalbytes.com.
Yep, at cloudfree.shop.
Oh, I think Cloudfree might be listening. He's just written in the Discord. How fun is that?
Hey!
He's just launched an EU shop as well, he tells us, which is exciting.
Oh, really? Well, there you go. What's the name of it?
eu.cloudfree.shop.
That makes sense.
If you can believe that. That's creative naming right there.
Well, thank you to our members, our SREs. You guys are the engineers that keep us going. You give us the runway to work with the sponsors that we want to work with, not just all of the ones that ask. So we appreciate that. You could become a member, and as a thank you, you get an ad-free version of the show, and you get a bonus post-show. selfhosted.show/SRE.
This week, we're going to be talking about my brand new soldering iron, the Pinesil. Pinesil? I think that's what it's called. I was going to say Pinesil 64. I'm not sure if it's the 64 or not, but
Pinesil version 1.
Yeah, it's a Pinesil soldering iron. So if you want to hear more about that, subscribe, and I'll be in the post show today.
And we always are making our best efforts to do this show live every other Wednesday. We did it live on May 18th, so you can do the math on that. But we also are listing it at jupiterbroadcasting.com/calendar, where you'll get it converted to your local time. Come hang out with us. We're also chatting with the Discord as we do the show.
Now, don't forget, if you want to let me know ideas about the London Meetup, August 6th is the provisional date. Go to selfhosted.show/contact.
And if you enjoy an episode of this show, share it with a friend. Word of mouth is the best way to share a podcast with someone.
It really is. Now, thanks for listening, everybody. That was self-hosted.show/71.